Welcome back, everyone. Now we will have a sharing about the humanities, arts, and social sciences, also known as HASS. Though we specialize in technology and design, HASS features prominently in our interdisciplinary education, making up 23% of our curriculum. Now, please welcome our head of cluster for HASS, Professor Lim Sun Sun, and our panel of students for this sharing.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good afternoon to all of you who have made your way to SUTD. We're so delighted to be able to welcome you physically to our campus, even in COVID times. And to those of you who are tuning in online, a very warm welcome to you as well. We are truly delighted to have this opportunity to share with you about the HASS component of the SUTD journey. And indeed, we believe so wholeheartedly in the value of the HASS component in SUTD that we like to refer to it as the HASS edge in SUTD. And what is this edge that the HASS experience confers to students in SUTD who are doing degrees in engineering as well as architecture? So, as you can see, this is a very typical scene in Singapore where you and I, we would find ourselves in. We'll be standing around, trying to pass the time, engrossed in our devices. And indeed, when you think about the world that we inhabit today, where would we be without all of these devices, all of these connectivity, all of these networks that we have inadvertently, willfully, willingly become a part of? And virtually no part of the universe is untouched by mobile phones, the internet, and different kinds of everyday technologies. In which case, precisely because technology has come to assume such an important role in our everyday lives, it is truly fundamental that we should ensure that technology is actually serving humanity and that we, humans, should not be marching to the beat of technology's drum. So this is why we believe in SUTD that all of the future engineers, architects, technologists, programmers, product developers must actually understand the world that they are designing for. And in our students' very first year of their SUTD journey, they will actually be required to take two mandatory courses. The first is in Global Humanities, where our students are introduced to literature, philosophy, and ethics, and how all of these long-held principles, values, beliefs have actually come to shape the world that we inhabit today. And at the same time, we also vest our students with different kinds of theoretical perspectives that help them to understand different aspects of our society, whether it is social behavior, whether it is cultural patterns, cultural norms, and all other political, economic aspects of society. And we feel that this broad introduction to the social sciences and the humanities empowers our students to choose their subsequent HASS electives in a more deliberate, more concerted, and more targeted fashion. So our students will share those with you a little bit more. But just to give you a taste of, I can't seem to forward the slide. If someone can forward it. Just to give you a sense of the diversity of So our students beyond the first year will take one HASS elective every year in the from term 4 onwards, and this can be from a large variety of disciplines, including anthropology, geography, history, there you go, anthropology, business and economics, urban studies, sociology, psychology, history, literature, philosophy, and so on. And if I had to sit down and describe all of these different electives to you, it would take me quite a lot of time because of their sheer diversity and richness. But what I hope this helps to impress upon you is that the Haas journey for our students can be very diverse. It can be very exciting depending on how you plan and how you choose those electives that speak to you, that speak to your interests, that align with your ambitions and aspirations. So in order for us to have the students enjoy a little bit more coherence in their Haas journey, we also introduced 2 minors. The first is Design, Technology, and Society. So Design, Technology, and Society essentially brings together perspectives from history, geography, sociology, psychology, in order for you to understand what's the long-term implications of technology and its impact on society. And these electives really help our students to have a very strong strategic overarching understanding of how technology is shaping the world that we live in, and it stands them in very good stead if they should join positions in strategic planning, management consulting, and so on. Now, besides the DTS minor, we also have the Digital Humanities minor. And the Digital Humanities minor really is about using digital languages, different kinds of computational methods in order to assess, to analyze, to categorize, to classify, to archive, to store different kinds of humanities content, whether you're talking about music, literature, visuals, film, performing arts, and so on. And we feel that the Digital Humanities minor really gives our students that sense of understanding how the digital languages, digital content can connect with the human condition in various ways. And we feel that it empowers students who are going into computing with creative perspectives on the world and the contents that humans generate. So all in all, I would say that the Haas journey aligns very neatly with the students' experiences as well as the skills and competencies they acquire in the pillars. So rather than hear it from me, I would like to invite my lovely team of students here who have joined us today to share their experiences. And on the left, we have Bala and Cassie, and on the right, Rafael and Hazel. So Bala, if you could introduce yourself, please. Thank you.
I'm Vivek Bala. I'm a final year student in SUTD, and I'm interested in how technology can help us organize human behavior and also scale that behavior across multiple local scales within Singapore.
Hi, I'm Cassie. I'm also a final year student, and I'm interested in building applications like IoT and cloud that are able to aid people in their day-to-day lives.
Hi, my name is Rafael. I'm a year 2 student. I'm currently in term 4, and my interests are really in how technology as well as the humanities and society interacts and connects.
Hi, I'm Hazel. I'm also a final year student, and I'm interested mainly in urban planning.
Wonderful. So you can see we have quite a diversity of interests and expertise here. So I want to just kick off the discussion today with the very first question, which is, why do you think engineers or architects even need to have HASS? Because honestly, we have students who come and they say, you know, the reason I came to join the technology university was because I'm interested in science and tech. So why are you making me waste my time taking HASS subjects? So Cassie, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So maybe you can get this rolling. Personally, having HASS as an elective every term really helped to give you perspective into your technological work. So you can say that, say I used to build applications for people with visual impairments. So in that sense, you want to go into the problem to help solve it with tech, but you have to consider the perspective of the user and not what you think the user needs. So in that sense, the humanities pillar gives you a lot of like say in your first year you have world text and all that. So it gives you a really wide range of perspectives, and it gives you the chance to go down to understand the user's needs and approach problems from their angle, and you understand what they need rather than what you think they need. And I think in that sense, the humanities pillars has been very helpful in supplementing how I approach problems from my technical perspective. Yeah.
Fascinating. Rafael, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, so I think for me, when I think about technology and I think about the kind of things that I use in my own life, right? Say the iPhone, right? The iPhone is more than just the materials that make up the iPhone, right? It's more than the circuitry, it's more than the glass, it's more than the metals. Really, I think it's more than some of its parts. A lot of it is also the cost of materials in terms of societal cost, maybe the politics of some of these materials and the economics of which makes the iPhone possible. And I think the study of humanities and the social sciences in particular, right, like economics and things like that, allows us to really put a lens on how we build technology, who we're building it for, as well as kind of the impacts of this technology on societies. Yeah.
Hazel?
Yeah, so like I feel that HASS really helps ground us down, especially since we're working with a lot of data, especially in an engineering school. And so like with so much technology, it's like how we can make use of this technology and bring meaning to the data. So for example, like we can like absorb and read a lot of text, but ultimately like and after you use a machine to analyze this text, you will then still need a humanities perspective to bring meaning to the text that you have analyzed, the various patterns that the machine has identified. It's up to the human to interpret it, and so that's why I feel that the HASS has really helped us like ground us down and make all this data seem more meaningful than just words or like numbers. Yeah.
Indeed, Hazel, you can be swimming in data and not know what any of it means or what to do with it. Bala?
Yeah, I'll add on to Hazel's point, which is the fact that when you have constraints and guardrails, you're able to actually understand the data or whatever overwhelming things we have around us much better. So I'll give an example. Analogy would be something like if you had a window through which you can view the world, that window will allow you to have a more amplified and richer understanding of the world than purely looking at it from an overwhelming bird's eye view. For example, the MRT track or MRT train you're in, if you look through the window, you can see the city much better and a better understanding of what to focus on than if you just had like an airplane ride over the city in an ivory tower kind of abstracted way. And that focus is what's intentional and what's important when an engineer decides to build or architect decides to create what he feels is something which will exemplify the conditions of the things he's building. Example would be when you're looking at a building, it will really articulate certain sentiments about what or senses which of the citizenry or systems which are in place to create those things into being. And especially as computer scientists and engineers in SUTD, that investment which is coming in and building up your capacity to really envision what the future has to hold has to be modulated and articulated through the vision of what you believe it has to hold for the rest of the people around you, and especially your fellow citizens and who are around you in as people and as families and all these units which you understand the world by. And that's what I think creates that focus which an engineer requires.
Great, thank you. So I love how you've all been able to give a big picture perspective to your HASS journey and your HASS experience so far. But I think in order to help our audience understand better what you're actually learning in HASS, could I invite you to share certain HASS electives that have really interested you, spoken to you, that you can't wait to get to class to attend the next lecture and make some new discoveries. So maybe Cassie again?
Okay, sure. So I think my favorite project I've done to date, because I'm in actually a digital humanities minor, was lyric poetry under one of our professors, Professor Hokama. And it's a very interesting module about, literature around the world. We talk about a bit about John Donne, and then we go to Tao Yuanming. So it's quite diverse. So for my final project, we actually tackled a question posed by Professor Gono, I believe, which was called, who really wrote A Visit of St. Nicholas? And if you don't know about this piece of work, it's actually considered an origin of the way we understand Santa Claus now, which is, this jolly old man who gives out presents to kids, right? And which is a really interesting take because this piece of work already has an author on it. You will know him as, I think, Clement Clark Moore. I think that was his name. And why are we debating the origin of this source if so many places already have his name label on it, So we took this debate and we're like, okay, let's try and argue with it with our digital humanities perspective. So we took tools like computer science. So we have R packages where we use stylometric tools to go and analyze both the text of Clement Clark Moore and the disputed author, Henry Livingstone Jr. And something interesting we found was that we actually found evidence to the contrary, that it's actually not Moore who was the author. And everything we looked at, all the graphs, all the data, every single output of the analysis all pointed to Henry Livingstone as the actual author of Visit of St. Nicholas, which really makes you question, like, you know, how much of the things we know are actually authentic. Yeah, right? So if even the origin of Santa Claus can be debated like this, I think it's very interesting. So for me, that was probably the most exciting project we've had. Being able to look at such a prominent piece of literature that shapes so many like perceptions of our world and culture, just by using, you know, I can mathematically prove to you that you're wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can actually use the data to make a compelling argument, right? Raphael?
Yeah, I think for myself, there were two mods that I took that were particularly interesting. The first one would be the question of being by Prof. Paolo, which is a philosophy mod. But I think the other one that is very interesting, I think to most people, it was actually an exchange program. The Freshmore Fact exchange program between UBD, University Brunei Darussalam, and SUTD. So in that module, actually, we had a week-long study of Islamic governance and how the Bruneian government worked. And I thought it was really interesting, right? Because it's not every day that you get exposed to the culture of a different country. And to really study it with their students as well was really eye-opening. Learning about their monarchy and why that is so important to their institution, I think really expanded my worldview and some of that perspective as well. Yeah.
So indeed, many Haas classes actually talk about different cultures, and this kind of cultural literacy that we invest in our students is really critical in an increasingly globalized world. So that aspect of the Haas journey is also very well appreciated by our students, and it works very nicely with SUTD's overall globalization thrust through our foreign exposure programs, through the fact trip, for example, that Raphael just spoke about. Hazel, would you like to share?
Yeah, so I'm also in the digital humans minor, and so there's a elective that I took, which was the classical Southeast Asian arts and literature, done with Prof. Alistair, and I really enjoyed it. We not only like looked into text, like poetry, drama, but also even like architecture and structures, like how they build their sculptures. So one thing I did was, my final year project was about how machines can identify Buddha. And you know, Buddha is a very it's a very popular religious figure. Almost everyone has an idea about how he looks like because he has a very unique feature to him, right? His face, his ears, his eyes. But throughout the different countries in Southeast Asia, each has their own unique take on how they depict Buddha. And so as people that study humanities, we know how to identify these different Buddhas. But then, so I was pushing whether, you know, with machine learning, where they use pattern recognition, is the machine able to be better than a human at identifying Buddha sculptures? So my project was mainly on supervised machine learning. And so, like, you just realize that there are traits that even the machine make the same mistake as humans, because some sculptures are so similar, but they're not Buddha, even though they have the same like features, such as the way the statue stands, because you know Buddha has a few interesting stances that once you look, you're like, oh, that's definitely Buddha. But beyond that, it's also like to expand on how we can make use of technology to help in humanities to like for identification of sculptures that do not come as a whole piece. So yeah, it's just a big possibility that we can expand on, and that's why I thought it was a very enjoyable time for me, because I was able to apply what I learned in SUTD, which is machine learning, to the art subject that I'm taking, which is the Southeast Asian classical literature. Yeah.
And that's a fascinating example. If you extrapolate those kinds of skills and competencies to, let's say, content moderation on social media platforms that have to weed out, online disinformation, fake news, deep fakes, and so on, it's also using that kind of machine learning powered pattern recognition, right? So the fact that our students are getting cutting their teeth through all of these different projects really gives them that interesting advantage in terms of using their skills and tools in very different scenarios. So we've had some interesting sharing about humanities courses in SUTD. I'll invite Bala to share his experience of social science courses in history and anthropology.
All right, I took Dr. Pang Yang Hui's East Asian Nexus, and during the East Asian Nexus program, I think my most pivotal week actually of the program was this 1 week before the midterms, where I was reading about Japanese history, and very deeply so. And the historical nature of events is such that I think often we live in a globalized kind of system. We understand geographical kind of understanding of where things are, but we are quite kind of provincial when we're thinking about, okay, what happened in the past, right? And Cicero once said the idea of you're always a child if you do not have the understanding of what the ancestors did. And today in a globalized world, actually, many countries have a lot of cultural strengths which we can learn a lot from. And I'll kind of talk deeply about this 1 week because that's when I was reading about the modernization of Japan, the shock therapy they went through with the Meiji Restoration, and what really impelled them down that route, and what was the tsunami which kind of conjured those kind of systems which allowed them to scale so rapidly into the 20th century, far before any of the Asian brothers really got an understanding of what was going on with the Western kind of mode of applying technology. And Meiji Restoration is a critical time in Japanese history, particularly because it was a reaction to the older feudal system, and also, of course, the Karufune, the black ships which arrived at their shore in the shore by Commodore Perry, which is the American general who came knocking. And the country kind of woke up in consciousness, and the Meiji emperor really instantiated and created a large, rapid scaling of how industry works, and also the organizations which are required to kind of have this capacity to be vanguards, which is particularly the Japanese army. And I kind of spent 1 whole week of rabbit holing, and I kind of submitted the assignment late. But really what really happened was I had this deep kind of awe because of how the Japanese people really decided to garner their strength, but also a lot of the terrors which we understand the Japanese people of being capable of inflicting upon other nations in their rise and their subsequent fall. And that story of how they traced those steps in the Pacific, through the Pacific Ocean, right, really drew certain ideas about how history itself speaks to what an engineer needs to be thinking about and what it means to be in the vanguard or the tip of the spear of the 21st century, because I think Singapore has gone through many of those kind of rapid shock therapy, kind of 1950s, 60s kind of modernization. And a lot of what we see and we think is unique to what Singaporeans feel, the apathy, the nature of what we think we are capable of as youth in this country, is also determined a lot. And we do not need to think we are alone in this situation and don't have any other countries to emulate. Because in the past, many countries and nations have gone through very similar kind of journeys, and we can also understand where they failed and where they went wrong, and modulate our own understanding of what we need to build and what the culture needs to have as systems for channeling a lot of the energy which is always subterranean in modern society.
Right. So the historical perspective allowed you to have the long view and to also prospectively be able to think about the big questions that are confronting humanity as we use and rely on technology even more heavily. So excellent, thank you. So in fact, I hope the sharing has intrigued you about the diversity of courses that we offer across multiple disciplines. But I also wanted to ask one last question, which is the misconceptions that people have about Haas in SUTD. And these are the misconceptions that I constantly have to dispel. So one of the most common misconceptions that's often presented to me is the fact that Haas is just like general paper at the A levels. And in fact, that is quite counter to the reality, which is that the Haas journey is actually quite different from the general paper, even though that, in general paper, you do deal with issues of global politics, economics, sociological trends, and so on. But I'll have the students help me to dispel this first misconception, which is that Haas is just like GP. So maybe Hazel, you want to give it a shot?
Oh, so like I know a lot of students are quite afraid of HASS because some HASS do require you to write essays, and so everyone hears essays and you're like, oh, why do I need to do essay in a STEM environment, right? But actually, honestly, the HASS faculty has been like very helpful, and also like they're very flexible with what you want to come up with as your midterm and your final paper, especially the few electives that I take. Most of the time, I propose my own project and I consult with my professors whether it's fine if I take this route, because many of the times they will give like prompting essay questions, but it's just as a groundwork for you to explore. In fact, if you can come up with your own question, the professor is more than gladly to accept it, and just you don't have to be too afraid. Like, it's really not GP-wise where you have to go heavy into like really looking up, but rather it's more of how you apply what you have learned through your journey in HASS, and then just so long as you cite, you should be fine. Yeah, citation is very important for your reports, but don't let the reports scare you. In fact, the professors are really flexible if you need more time and help, and so just don't be afraid. Yeah, don't fear HASS. In fact, I think HASS really helps you in SUTD because it's a breath of fresh air away from all of the science and math practices, because it really does help you like just relax for a bit and just look at something else for the moment. Yeah.
Thank you. And there's another common misconception, which is that HASS electives lack rigor, that they are just things that you can do easily with half a brain and, focus most of your time and your energy on your pillar subjects. Cassie, would you like to dispel that misconception?
Well, rigor-wise, I think maybe Bala would have the most experience of all of us. But I think generally, for me, you do have to do a lot of readings. I think that's basically like foundation building to understand really the kind of content that you're going into for each module. So for me, I did a lot of literature-based subjects, and the readings themselves are one part of it, but for me, it's very rigorous because, say, for humanities modules, we have much smaller classes compared to maybe your generic pillar ones. So that gives you a chance to really sit with your peers and the professors. And say, for my classes under Prof. Hokama, we do a lot of discussion. And like, say you take one film of Shakespeare, like a Merchant of Venice, and then we can take one scene and we can argue about it for like 20 minutes, just because everyone has a different perspective on, hey, I think this character is portrayed very differently from in the text, and I think maybe the director had this impression when he wanted to bring across to the audience, and someone will say, oh, really, I thought this character was actually less aggressive than I thought he was originally, just based off the script. So I think that kind of rigor is more of, it helps you to think very deeply about the contents that you are working with. And it's not really just, okay, I read this and I'm going to write a paper on it. It's much more of interactive discussion, bouncing off of ideas, and developing your own conclusions from what you've understood from classes. So yeah, I think it's much more rigorous than just essay writing and reading alone. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe Bala, you'd like to share your experience on this question, particularly drawing on your anthropology elective that you took with Dr. Lyle Fernley?
Yeah, definitely. So in regards to rigor, I would say that actually if you really want to push yourself in HASS, you can actually have a lot of latitude in terms of what you want to explore. And that allows you to actually partner with professors quite closely, especially when you want to build deeper your understanding of what is happening with regards to certain periods in time, certain ideas. Because the one thing which is very critical to understand about HASS, which is a bit different from maybe your JC or previous experience, would be particularly that the faculty is actually deeply interested in what they're talking about and what they are interested in. And that would mean that there's a lot of genuine kind of understanding of an interaction which they want to tap onto you and understand and pick your own idea of what you think and also to have that kind of dialectic between you and a professor to build greater knowledge and deeper understanding of what you want to talk about. With regards to Prof. Life Fernley, I worked with him for the final term project, and during that essay, the critical thesis was of the nature of ecological and technological systems. And I explored actually quite mythological things like particularly Emperor Yu and how he channeled and irrigated a massive load of land and to create the irrigation systems which created the birth or the kernel of birth or the Chinese civilization, which is not particularly what Dr. Lyle Fernley himself was interested in, but adjacent to his interest in how ecological and technological systems can interact and create new possibilities for civilizational growth or cultural growth. And one particularly interesting field is that even though it was considered mythological, some papers which have come out in recent years suggest that there was deep ideas about or deep evidence that there was a floodplain which was in present 2000 BC, and the nature of how the long-term flooding patterns could have resulted in major changes in how civilization had to move, or the cultural course had to move north, especially in China. And that, I think, undergirds certain ideas about what our place in the world is today. And also with nature of that, Singapore itself has a critical role to play, right? And not to get engulfed or subsumed by the larger titans in the cultural plane, such as China or America. We need to individuate our own understanding.
Thank you. So another misconception, of course, is that there's actually very little linkage between what you learn in Haas and what you learn in the pillars. So I'd like to invite Raphael, because Raphael has actually a background in the performing arts, to share with us how he managed to combine his interest in the performing arts with his passion for coding.
Yeah, so I think for myself, I was a theatre student, I was a film student, totally wasn't really a STEM student before I came to SUTD. And actually I was, the one thing that I was very worried about was when I would come here, it would be kind of like a desert, or I wouldn't be able to access the same things that really motivated me to go to school every day in the past. Things like humanities, social sciences, Shakespeare. I was afraid I would totally lose all of this. But I'm glad that I was proven wrong. In fact, Haas is probably one of the things that I look forward to every week now. Really, I think when we think about the intersection between the humanities, social sciences, the arts, and technology, it's not a new concept, right? If we look back in time, we look at people like, say, Leonardo da Vinci and these artisans of the past. This idea of a Renaissance man, somebody who can appreciate the arts and appreciate all those different perspectives, the abstract, the aesthetic, as well as being inventive and creating inventions and engineering. So I think coming here and being in between sort of these two worlds and having this emphasis on the humanities and the Haas being 23% of the curriculum and so forth, has really inspired me to think about and contextualize the kind of things that I build in a very different way. For example, I think in the freshman year, we always have this thing called the 2D project, right? Which would bridge all the things that you learn together. And even though we are building, say, a parachute, right? And we have to think about the context of this parachute. So say sending COVID supplies, emergency supplies into a particular country, right? And having to think about what it means to help other countries, and why do some countries not want to take part in foreign aid. Some of these discussions are very relevant to some of the engineering solutions or problems that we might have come up with, and learning to contextualize the solution in a holistic way, mirrors really what is necessary in real life, in the real world context. Having to balance the needs of society, the needs of people, as well as the needs of technology and how we advance together as society. Really, as Bala said, we're at the tip of the spear. We're pushing this at this frontier. Yeah, and I think having to clarify that is very important.
Thank you. So we're going to leave the rest of the time for question and answer. I'm happy to take questions from the floor, but while we wait for the audience here, I also do have questions online. And the first question is, what kinds of group projects are there in HASS courses? So I'll invite Cassie to share some of your group projects.
I can probably answer on behalf of the digital humanities side. So for us, actually, we do take a more unique take on projects compared to maybe someone who isn't taking a minor. So normally in a module, you have final and maybe midterm papers depending on what the professors set out for the course. But for us, we have the option of taking a digital humanities final project in lieu of the original projects itself. So like the mentioned discussion about the visit of St. Nicholas from earlier, it was actually a final project for digital humanities in place of the final paper that would have normally been written instead. So I think in the humanities scope, our projects is very highly dependent on the module and the professors, but if you do join the digital humanities, you have the option to explore anything digital that also relates to the content of your course. So I know there are some seniors who actually did things like they basically fed a machine learning model a lot of tweets from the US presidential election, and then at the end they were like, okay, can you spit out a poem on your own for me? And the results are pretty funny. I'm not sure if you can find them in the Digital Humanities Pillar website, yeah. But those are some of the very interesting projects that you can take part in, as long as you discuss with your professors and then you come to a consensus with them, yeah.
You can, and in fact, there was also another team that analyzed, if I'm not wrong, PM Lee's National Day rally speeches in order to highlight, what are some of the popular words that he used. And then also there have been students who have grouped together to develop things like interactive maps of, let's say, China, and how different kinds of plants, flora and fauna were represented in the poetry from different provinces in China, and how these flora and fauna also had certain kinds of emotional valence, as well as nutritional value, medicinal value, and so on. So they created interactive maps as well. But there are also other projects that are more, hands-on. Maybe Bala, you'd like to share from the anthropology side?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, under Dr. Pang Yang Hui, our final project was actually not a solitary endeavor. It was a collective group effort. And my team actually, we worked on understanding Korean War dynamics, and of course between the major players and also the organizations which were in play. Usually people understand politics and history in terms of big, great minds, but in fact, the many multiple pieces which are moving in the chessboard and drawing board, and the possibilities that are conjured are actually articulation of many deep underlying organizational behaviors and also collective behavior of people. And many of the central players during the time, like Zhou Enlai, Mao Zedong, and Stalin, of course, and his cadres in the Communist Party. It was also a project directed towards building out data maps and organizational charts and mapping these knowledge graphs to contextualize the data which were coming in from telegrams, which we collected from the Wilsonian data archives. And I think particularly what was critical and interesting about it is that we are given the space and time to not just think about it in solitary terms and what it means for me to understand this topic, but also what my group mates think about this and what my fellow brothers and sisters think about what is happening, and to interact with them with that intention, right?
Right. That's an excellent point, that in fact the group projects actually allow you to have that experience of understanding other people's perspectives and thinking about how you can reconcile the differences within the group to work towards that sort of common goal to complete the project, right?
Definitely.
So all of these different group dynamics are a really excellent learning experience. So I want to move on to another question, which is a kind of like technical question, but it will probably help if the students answer this, which is, given that HASS classes are compulsory, how much do these lessons take up in one curriculum semester? Is it 20% HASS, 80% major degree lessons? So the short answer is yes, but I would like the students to explain experientially how that feels.
So I think for myself at least, so I've got 4 mods a week that I have to get to, and one of them is HASS, right? So yeah, the math is right there. But how much time you spend in Haas is you know, how much you get out of Haas is a function of how much time you spend on it also lah, right? What I found is that quite a number of my friends who were previously maybe afraid of Haas, they tried to spend a bit more time on it and tried to put themselves in a frame of mind to understand why things were as such, and then they realized, hey, actually, I quite enjoy this. Actually, this is quite interesting, and then they spend more time on it. So I think the danger of Haas is not so much that it takes up a lot of time from the get-go, but once you get started, it's very compelling. You almost get sucked on this train, right? Like Bala said, right? You know, this rabbit hole of going to read more and understanding, hey, why is this so? Why is this so? And I think from that point of view, Haas does take some time, but rightfully so, and it's enjoyable as well. Yeah.
Hazel, would you like to add to that?
So highlighting how often, like how much time we spend on Haas, obviously I would spend more time because, especially for the digital humans final reports, I actually really enjoy doing them actually, but it's like kind of close to the actual SUTD finals, so I really sometimes end up having to reel myself back. But like, cause once I get my code to work and I can really go more in depth, like because to do the final paper, you have to do a lot of pre-research, and then you end up jumping through a lot of research papers, trying to find what you need, and you just end up learning so much more. And then it just becomes, it's actually a really enjoyable process, especially since, for me, I get to come up with my own question to answer. So it's not like it was some given question, and then I had to study for it, but rather I crafted my own question, and then I pursued my own research. So that's why I find it more enjoyable for me in a sense. So I do spend, like, okay, I can honestly tell you for the digital humans, some of the final essays, it really takes way longer, like maybe at least 3 days of non-stop just researching. But really, it's really just like a rabbit hole, and then you just kept going until you just feel very proud of what you have done and what you want to submit. And I'm pretty sure most of us here just feel that way. Like when we submit our final paper, we're actually proud of what we did, all the research we have done, and how we applied the whole term's knowledge into this one paper. Yeah.
So I'm glad Hazel described her experience, because the next question is actually, how else can Haas assist with our engineering education? And I have to say that one of the most important things that I found in the course of my career as an academic, grooming and mentoring so many generations of students, is the fact that the ability to communicate your knowledge is so important. And so this is where the Haas assignments, whether it's projects, whether it's essays and so on, they really force our students to think of how best to put together in a comprehensive yet accessible and succinct fashion their ideas. They also have the training as well as the challenge that hones them repeatedly as to how they want to best express their ideas, how they want to assert different opinions from other people in the team, how they want to reconcile conflicting concepts and so on. And this importance of communication is only going to become even more salient as our societies become much more reliant on digital communication. As we looked, in the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to work from home. So much of our communication with our colleagues has migrated to online platforms and so on. So having that ability to communicate yourself and your thoughts effectively, persuasively, that's also something that Haas does in terms of providing you with the training. So his question also was, well, how else can Haas assist with our engineering education? And this is where I'm going to invite the students to help me answer this question. But I do feel that for our students, when you enter the market as someone with an engineering degree, it may be very difficult to distinguish yourself from all of the other engineers who are being graduated from all of these universities. But within SUTD, because you've got that Haas edge, you've been able to take digital humanities minors or design technology society minors, you're able to craft yourself as an engineer who's a little bit different, who's got that depth of understanding in certain topics. So this is where I'd like the students to maybe draw their Haas experience with their career aspirations, because many of them are already in their final year thinking about careers that they want to join. So maybe Cassie, you want to share how you feel that your Haas experience has given you an edge in terms of jobs that you're applying for.
Okay, so personally, because I like to build things for people to use, right? Actually, one of the modules I'm taking now is a IoT and cloud computing one. So in our current project, we are asked to tackle basically any IoT problem that you can think of. And I think having the humanities edge to it means for me that I will be able to formulate a problem that actually might exist, and then we try to bring it across in a way that will help people that is accessible and maybe like cheap if possible. So even if we might not bring this project to the real world, it's like a practice for actually developing products that people might use in the future. So you are thinking about all the constraints, the needs and wants of people. If I want to build if I want to track whether your vegetables in your fridge are fresh, what kind of sensors do I need? How do I deliver this to maybe an elderly person in information in a way that they can understand, and still be, maybe it doesn't use a lot of power, so it's still not too bad for the environment, things like that. So I think that's the kind of edge that the humanities has given me, even outside of the humanities modules themselves. Yeah, so for me, when I look towards the future to finding a job in IoT and things like that, I hope to be able to continue bringing my experience and knowledge from humanities to be able to aid people better. Yeah.
Right. So when you approach a design challenge, it's not just about building something, but it's about building something that ticks all the boxes in terms of user friendliness, in terms of compatibility with the lifestyle, in terms of whether it meets their budgets, as well as their competency levels.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, everything we build for technology is always for someone at the end. It's always a person at the end, not another machine. So you always have to consider all these perspectives when it comes to it. Yeah.
Right. And Hazel, you're also entering the job market soon. How would you answer this question?
So because, like I said, I was quite interested in urban planning. And so, Singapore, we have very interesting districts, especially like Chinatown, Little India. And so, the Haas really helps. So sometimes people wonder, why does it matter to preserve the architecture of these shop houses, But they not just bring an aesthetic flair to it. So as soon as you see the picture, you go, oh yeah, that's Chinatown. Most of the buildings have to really look the aesthetic as well. And so I just thought that, because being in the digital humans, I already do a lot of analysis of objects like sculptures and their building designs as well. And so this is how I can also apply this machine learning knowledge into architecture and design as well. So so the Haas just really helps. So there's a difference. That the things that you do can already bring meaning to all what is already around us. Even just analysis of really old text, and yeah. So it's different in the sense that our engineers will already have background on many humanities subjects, especially with the wide variety we have. We learn so many different Haas electives, and then we can bring the knowledge that we gain from all of our Haas electives with us to our next job, that maybe some other engineers won't have that chance to do so compared to us. Yeah.
Indeed, and you've raised an interesting point about urban planning and big data, which is that, we live in a very connected universe, particularly in Singapore with all of our smart nation vision. We essentially have a great deal of data that can inform how we plan our city, how we deal with urban congestion, how we tackle the challenge of epidemiological control in pandemic times, and so on. But also think about our day-to-day life, what's the quality of our built environment, how can we make it pleasurable yet sustainable? How can we make it, the best home for all of us, right? So I think that brings us to the end of our panel sharing today. But I am very grateful to the lively sharing of our students here today. And I thank all of you for staying with us till the end of our session. So if you have further questions, please do check out our Haas website, and you will see that there are all kinds of linkages to student projects, different kinds of electives, the innovative pedagogies that our faculty use in their teaching. And I hope that if you have any further questions about Haas, further misconceptions that you would like us to dispel, that you will get in touch with me and my colleagues. Our contact details are available on the website. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Lim and esteemed guests. We've now come to the end of our program for today. Thank you, everyone, for attending the SUTD Open House. Now, the first step of your exciting journey begins here. If you're interested in being a part of this extraordinary family, please submit your application by March 19th. I look forward to welcoming you to this extraordinary community. Once again, my name is Sun Yi. Thank you for your attention and have a wonderful evening.